Where is Freddie Freeman? That's what's on the mind of all Atlanta Braves fans as the free agent first baseman continues to be searching for a home. Who are the main suitors for Freeman and what other moves could the Braves be plotting? It's a busy hot stove season, and we'll cover all of that on today's episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
Hey, this is Stacey Gotsoulias,
DC Lundberg,
Ryan Finkelstein,
Taylor Blake Ward,
host of Locked On Yankees,
Locked On Mariners,
Locked On Mets,
Locked On Angels,
and you're listening to Locked On Braves.
Locked On Braves,
Locked On Braves,
part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, where we are talking about your favorite teams every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on Twitter at ShortstopBall. Check out my bio there to see where I am covering the game of baseball, including the Atlanta Braves in written form over at TomahawkTake.com. I also covered AA South or Prospects 1500, the Birmingham Barons for Southside Sox, and college baseball for College Baseball Nation. Also, please make sure you follow the podcast on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves. Send me in your questions, comments, feedback so that you can be part of the show. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube as well and wherever you get your podcast. And thanks for making Locked On Braves your first listen each and every day. We post episodes daily, 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, and are free and available on all platforms. And before we get into today's episode, I want to remind you this episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. So free agency is open back up. The offseason is open back up. And while it took a little while for things to get going, we're finally starting to see that frenzy that everybody was so excited about. A lot of moves over the weekend, but one move that has not been made so far is Freddie Freeman, and that is what all Atlanta Braves fans are focused on. It seems like he could potentially be holding up things, not only for the Braves, but I think for the rest of free agency here, at least for some of the big names. So we're going to talk about that, where he stands with the Atlanta Braves, who all are interested. We're also going to take some of your questions from Twitter, talking about Joc Pederson, talking about the rule changes, and also looking at Christian Pache and Drew Waters, how they could impact the 2022 season. Well, let's jump into what I think is probably the top thing that all Braves fans are thinking about right now, and that is Freddie Freeman. And we've covered this from every angle, especially, with all the time we had during the lockout. Here we are. The lockout has ended. We're 4 days in, and Freddie Freeman still has not been signed. So, look, a lot of speculation over the weekend from the Yankees to the Dodgers. I really think the Yankees made a ton of moves on Sunday, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Sounds like it's really between the Dodgers and the Braves at this point, which is a little bit scary because, he's picking between his hometown team and his actual hometown where he's from in California. So I think it's a viable option for him to go to LA if he wants to, if that's where the bigger money is. I believe I've said this on the podcast before. I know I've written it over at TomahawkTake.com back before the lockout began. And this is still where I am at this point. I don't think the Braves are willing to bid against themselves, which is a smart business move. But I just don't think there's a ton of suitors for Freddie Freeman, at least, serious suitors for him, which is unfortunate for Freddie because he's one of the best players in the game. I just don't think there's a lot of people looking to spend, close to $200 million on a 32-year-old first baseman. Look, if he wasn't a franchise player for the Braves, I would be more hesitant to say give him 6 years and 170 or 180, whatever the case may be. But I just don't think a lot of other teams are going to be willing to do that. So I think that narrows the teams that are interested in him. We may get a surprise team. We've seen where the Rays, made an offer before the lockout. But I really think it's down to the Braves and the Dodgers at this point. And that makes sense because I think Freddie, ultimately wants to pick where he wants to go, and I think he'll either stay where he's comfortable in Atlanta, or he'll go back to the West Coast and play for the Dodgers, or I don't think the Angels are in play here, but those are always the teams that I thought Freddie would go to. I thought he'd either stay in Atlanta or go to one of the LA teams and play there. So it seems like, again, it's between the Braves and the Dodgers. And look, again, where I think this thing is right now, where I think it's been for a while, like I was starting to say, is I don't think the Braves are going to bid against themselves. And it's really going to take another team pushing the envelope in order for the Braves to up their offer. And again, that's a smart business move, but it could really backfire here. If Freddie gets ticked off because the Braves aren't really budging at all and they're not, getting close to what he wants, that could certainly be something that he doesn't take kindly. I mean, look, he's already been disrespected, in my opinion, by not getting this done a long time ago. And now here we are. The season's, less than 4 weeks away from starting, and the Braves still haven't come to his demands. And, you can debate and argue that maybe his demands are too high, whatever. I think he's earned it. I think he deserves it. But again, I think that could ultimately push Freddie away. And unless the Dodgers just come in with an overwhelming offer that really makes the Braves up their offer, then I don't really see them moving much. And, if that turns off Freddie and he just wants to go home to California, then, I think he will at that point. But I think ultimately what's happening is Freddie's just waiting for somebody to push the Braves to up their offer to get to a deal that he is more closer to what he feels he deserves. That's me thinking, hopefully, optimistically, that he's just waiting for the Braves to finally get close to what he wants, and then he's going to pick the Braves. That's what I'm hoping. But again, I think that move could backfire on Atlanta, and they wait too long, and the Dodgers come in with a strong offer, and he goes home to California. So we'll see how this thing plays out. I think this is really holding up a lot of free agency right now, but I can't imagine this drags on too much longer. I kept waiting to do a podcast over the weekend because I thought this would get done a lot sooner, but here we are. I'm recording Monday morning and still no deal, really nothing even reported. And also something to keep in mind, as a lot of you already know, the Braves don't leak information. So any information you're hearing from the Braves side of things, take with a grain of salt. Most of the Freddie Freeman rumors we've gotten have come from other teams, the Yankees or the Dodgers. But I also love all the Braves players and coaches in camp right now, really talking about how much they love Freddie Freeman. I mean, what are they going to say about the guy? But almost petitioning. I mean, good grief, you're at the World Series parade on stage and you have Dansby Swanson saying, bring Freddie Freeman back. I mean, that's how much this guy means to this team. That's why I think it would be an utter failure if they don't bring him back. So hopefully they get it done. Hopefully it happens soon, because I'm really tired of refreshing Twitter all day long looking for updates on this. So I'm sure as soon as I post this, it'll happen, because that's the way things go. And if that does, I'll just record another podcast. But I was waiting all weekend for something to happen so I could record one, and it never did. So like I said, as soon as this gets posted, you can guarantee that Freddie Freeman deal will get done. But that's where things stand right now with Freddie Freeman. Looks like it's down to the Dodgers and the Braves. Next, we're going to take your questions. We're going to be talking about the Joc Pederson. We're going to be talking about the new rule changes, which I discussed last week as well, and talk about center field as well with Christian Pache and Drew Waters. It's that time of year again, as college basketball's tournament is finally upon us. From all the latest odds, contests, and player props, BetOnline.net is the number one source for all your sports betting needs and info. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so asked for some questions on Friday. Again, anticipating doing a Friday night podcast with some questions, and didn't get around to that as I was waiting on some hopeful news about Freddie Freeman. So we'll carry that into today's podcast. This question coming from Chris Shaffey on Twitter says, what are your thoughts on Joc returning to the Braves? Look, I love Joc Pederson, and I would not mind him returning to the Braves at all. I will say I would much rather have Eddie Rosario, if it was between those two. But I certainly love Joc Pederson. I see him more as a role player, somebody off the bench, maybe gets a start against righties every now and then. But that's kind of how I view him, as more of a role player, not necessarily an everyday player. And I think Joc's going to go to a place where he can get a chance to play every day. But if you're following Joc on Twitter, he's very kind of hilarious right now, talking about his decisions and where he's going to go. Got a great Dumb and Dumber quote in one of his tweets referencing earlier. So I love Joc Pederson. I think he did wonders, at least, for the Braves clubhouse chemistry when he came over, the first moves to really kind of start that turnaround. So I love Joc Pederson. Again, I would not be mad at all if the Braves brought him back. They need left-handed bats. They need several left-handed bats, and that's after hopefully getting Freddie Freeman. But I would prioritize Eddie Rosario over him. I would love having both of them if possible. But I certainly think it's a great fit. Just depends on what Joc wants to do, because I don't know that he'll be an everyday player for the Braves. Although with the DH, perhaps he gets more playing time there. But I do like Joc Pederson. I think he should definitely be on the Braves list. He'd be a little bit further down on my list, but would not be mad at all if the Braves decide to bring him back. Again, I think it's going to come to Joc and whether or not he wants to go somewhere where he knows he'll get a chance to play every day, or if he's okay kind of taking a back seat on somebody like a Braves, a World Series contender type team. So we'll see how that plays out. But yes, I would love to have Joc Pederson back on the Braves with the right fit and the right deal. VT Murdoch says, interested in your opinion on the new rules changes. Who won the negotiations? Will there be spring training? So yes, there'll be spring training. Actually, there was an official announcement over the weekend that spring training games will begin on March 17th. So that's certainly exciting. Just a couple of days away, we'll have actual baseball games to talk about. So that will be a lot of fun. Again, a very condensed spring training, which worries me. That gives you 3 weeks before opening day. That's not enough time for starters to really get stretched out. So I think that's going to play a big part in the early part of the regular season with how deep starters are able to go into games, whether or not there's a 6-man rotation. And it's really just not a lot of time for players to win spots. And we'll talk about that more in the next question. But it is a very short spring training, which has me a little bit worried. But yes, we will have a spring training, and games will start on the 17th. Players' mandatory reporting was this past Sunday as well, so we should have a lot of players in camp already. And then going back to the new CBA rules changes, who won the negotiations? I went over the rules changes last week. If you want to go back and check that out, I really was fine with all the rules changes that we have right now. The DH, the expanded postseason, it's next year where we could be looking at banning the shift and things like that. Well, where we'll maybe get a little bit iffy on some of these rule changes. But right now, as far as the rule changes coming in for this year, I really don't have any problems with any of those rules changes. As far as who won the negotiations, I think the players overwhelmingly won the negotiations, which I was so surprised to see the executive committee deny that last proposal from the owners. I think they overwhelmingly won these negotiations. Look, they got higher pay for young players, significant more pay. They got a $50 million pool that was never there before, new money that was added in for young players. They got the minimum raise. They got the CBT raise. I mean, they accomplished all their goals. Now, you could say this was just catching up for past negotiations where maybe they lost, and that's, could be true, but still, they made up significant ground to get back to more where they should be. So I think the players won it. Look, the owners never lose. They're going to make money, so it's hard to ever call them losers in anything. But I thought the players did a great job and getting younger players more money or having a chance for more money. And that's really, what the biggest issue was for me, and I think for the players going into these negotiations. So I thought they did very well in this deal. And then our final question comes from Wendy Jr. 10 on Twitter. Says, will Christian Pache be up in the MLB to start the season? Will Drew Waters be up as well? So a good question here. And one thing to keep in mind, they're talking about expanding the rosters to begin the season because of the short spring training. And I think they will. I think they'll expand the rosters by 2 or 3. And if they do that, I think Pache is somebody who definitely gets on the roster. Look, I think Pache might make the team anyway. I think you could put him, in center field to start the season. Sounds like Ronald Acuna Jr. might not be ready right away. So I think Pache might actually be the starting center fielder, depending on what the other moves are. I mean, you could have Adam Duvall start in center field. I talked about this last week as well. I think Duvall is probably option number 1 in center field. Pick up another bat for the outfield as well, and could see Marcelo Ozuna in the outfield. We'll talk about that in the next segment too. But yes, I do think Pache, especially if rosters are expanded, I think he starts the year on the major league roster. I don't think Drew Waters will. And Drew Waters still has some things to prove in AAA. I mean, you can say Pache does as well, but I think Waters, if he has a good first half, maybe the second half of 2022, he gets a shot. But, I would not be counting on him at all, as far as 2022 goes. But I do think Pache probably starts the year in the big leagues, at least through April, if rosters are expanded. Those expanded spots or additional spots will probably go to pitchers, most likely. But I think that would give Pache an added chance to be on the roster again if he's not the starting center fielder. And that's where I talk about this shortened spring training. Somebody like Pache, he's not going to have a lot of time to really prove himself and prove that he deserves a spot on the major league roster. He deserves that center field job to start the season. By the way, he is on social media over the weekend, and he was great as well. So make sure you follow him on Twitter. But thanks for all the questions. Really do appreciate those. Continue to send those in, please. And next, we will talk about other news and notes. A lot of stuff going on around the league over the weekend, so we'll get into all of that next. This is the time of year I've pretty much given up on all my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bars, and it almost doesn't even feel like a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. And have you tried their puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy, they're not just a protein bar, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. In fact, all Built Bars are covered in 100% real chocolate. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bar with these. A typical candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories, while most Built Bars contain just 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. And they have great flavors from mint brownie, coconut almond, white chocolate cookies and cream, regular cookies and cream. They are delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If they think of a flavor that might be good, they'll make it. It will be delicious, and it will be good for you as well. So go to built.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, so we'll wrap up here with some other news and notes from around the league. Again, a ton to get to. I won't even really be able to cover it all here. Marley Rivera reported that Ronald Acuna Jr. is hoping for a return in May. Braves still need to get their eyes and hands on him, obviously, to evaluate. But looks like, at least for Acuna's sake, he is shooting for a May return. So I think that could be great news. Certainly, if he's back by the beginning of May, I think that would be fantastic. Getting into some of the moves from over the weekend, you had our first kind of big blockbuster trade on Sunday night as old friend Josh Donaldson, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and Ben Rortvedt went to the Yankees in a trade from the Twins for Gary Sanchez and Gio Urshela. This was actually the second time that Isaiah Kiner-Falefa was traded over the weekend, as he went. Texas sent him to Minnesota for Mitch Garver. So a whirlwind weekend for IKF. Twins also traded for Sonny Gray for 26th overall pick from 2021 Chase Petty. I don't know. I always kind of liked Sonny Gray for the Braves, but I thought they would want a much bigger package. I mean, it's a first round pick, and Chase Petty, I kind of evaluate that as similar to Spencer Strider, and I honestly don't know that I would have done that deal. But I think that would have been a similar comp to what the Braves probably would have had to give up for Sonny Gray. Chase Petty, a high upside arm, throws 100 miles per hour. So I think that would probably kind of be similar to Spencer Strider from the Braves, and I really like Strider's upside. So I don't know that I would have done that deal, but still, I thought it was a little less than what maybe the Reds could have gotten for him. The A's traded Chris Bassett to the New York Mets for JT Ginn and Adam Oller. I like JT Ginn. I think he's a very solid prospect with some good upside, but the Mets get some more depth to their rotation with Chris Bassett. They also signed Adam Ottavino for the bullpen, and the Nats made a lot of moves over the weekend. They signed Adrianza, who the Braves just had. They signed Steve Cishek, Nelson Cruz, Sean Doolittle, Anibal Sanchez. Prior to the lockout, they got Cesar Hernandez, Michael Franco, and D. Gordon. So the Nationals made a ton of moves. It sounds like they're kind of trying to win. And I guess when you have one of the best players, in all of baseball in Juan Soto, you probably should. So some interesting moves there from the Nats. And then also in the NL East, you had the Phillies getting Jerry's Familia as well for $6 million. So, I mean, the NL East been busy other than the Braves, who I'm sure are completely focused on Freddie Freeman at the moment. Going back to the Nelson Cruz thing, the Nationals signed him for $12 million with another option for 2023 that has a $3 million buyout, so guaranteed $15 million. The Braves are reported to be very serious or have very serious interest in Nelson Cruz. Now, it sounds like a lot of teams, especially National League teams, had interest in Nelson Cruz, who was never available to them before, which is what the DH has brought to all of this. But that was very interesting because you figure the Braves already have a DH in Marcell Ozuna. So that kind of tells you one of two things. Either the Braves are comfortable putting Ozuna back in left field, or perhaps they think maybe they can move him, because I don't know why you would have Ozuna and Cruz on the same roster. That doesn't make a ton of sense to me, at least, but sounds like the Braves were very interested in Nelson Cruz, but he ended up signing with the Nationals. And the Blue Jays signed starter Yusei Kikuchi for a 3-year deal for $36 million. That's the longest free agent deal we've seen so far post lockout. And then Carlos Rodon signed with the Giants for 2 years and $44 million. That's the largest free agent deal we've seen so far. Oh, another old friend, Anderton Simmons, he signed a 1-year, $4 million deal with the Cubs, and Clayton Kershaw went back to the Dodgers. So a lot of news, and they say this Monday could be even crazier. I'm sure this week will be even crazier. So we'll keep things locked in here at Locked On Braves. I'll be keeping you updated with all the information as it comes out. Obviously, once the Freddie Freeman situation happens, whether it's with the Braves or with the Dodgers or somebody else, we'll be jumping back on the microphone to let you know all about it and break it down. But that will do it for this episode of Locked On Braves. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at LockedOn_Braves, and you can follow me at ShortstopBall. Also, make sure you subscribe to the podcast wherever you get your podcast. Subscribe to us on YouTube as well, and we will talk to you next time.